I call the honourable member Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in this Genesis energy debate. Has any other country had to endure the sort of madness that National has imposed on our electricity system? No. This national government has taken ideological fixation and fantasy to new heights. Nothing has been learnt from the past. Nothing has been remembered from the mistakes of the 1980s and the 1990s. Not content with Max Bradford's theory-driven mess, they've spent the last 3 years selling state power assets to enrich their pals and their mates. Now we've ended up with a Byzantine structure that is baffling and wholly without logic. The state asset sale program is entirely consistent with National's agenda. That agenda is to use every opportunity to transfer wealth from the many, the general public of New Zealand, to the few, namely their friends, mates and cronies of the National Party. Feathering the nests of the few, that's the National way. It's an outrageous theft of the Commonwealth into the hands of the speculator and assorted wheeler dealers. In the case of one of the state-owned enterprise power generating companies, nearly 10% of the shares went to a New York bank. That's hardly moms and pops New Zealanders, when nearly 10% went to a New York bank. And I wonder how close that New York bank was to Mr Key, who himself was a former New York banker. So it is very, very suspicious indeed that suddenly a New York bank pops up out of nowhere to buy into our power companies. There was overwhelming public opposition to the selling up of 49% of Meridian Energy, Mighty River Power and Genesis Power. The public well understood that these assets, built up by generations of Kiwis, were not for the government to sell. The public were not fooled by all the ideological waffle that National and an army of paid lobbyists who were paid over $100 million and media hacks churned out. These were assets owned by all New Zealanders, not just the select few, not just the 2.5% who ended up buying the shares, but by all New Zealanders. Assets built up by 2 or 3 generations, by my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents and your great-grandparents, built up those assets across the length and breadth of New Zealand. The likes of the dams on the Waikato River, the likes of the hydro schemes in the South Island, the likes of the thermal plants that we have in the central North Island. These were built up over many generations. There are some of us who can remember when New Zealand had a generating and electricity system that was the envy of the world. There was a time when the electricity system was a public utility that we were proud of. It was run for the benefit of all, because a little bit like water, a little bit like air, but power and gas are a basic staple requirement that we all require and we all must have. We took advantage of hydropower to have some of the lowest priced power prices in the world. National, in their inimitable genius, threw all that away. In their incompetence and greed, they cast aside a system the rest of the world could only envy. No, New Zealand's electricity system had to be stuffed up well and truly just to favour the few. Among those few, those happy few, are the CEOs of those energy companies. At the top, there are $1 million plus executives receiving huge salaries. At the other end of the scale, Kiwis are struggling to pay soaring power and electricity prices. On Sunday, the Sunday Star Times did a public service by revealing what the chief executives of 5 of our biggest energy companies earn. The CEOs' mega paychecks are as follows. Contact Energy, $1.58 million to the CEO of Contact Energy. Genesis, $1.35 million, and that was an increase of 12% in salary in the last 12 months to $1.35 million. Mighty River Power, $1.3 million. Transpower, $1.22 million, and Meridian, $1.0 million. All $1 million salaries to pay for these executives to run our power companies, which have been there for decades and decades in most cases, which have been the staple backbone of this economy. As the asset sales program has shown, national shameless manipulation has no bounds. The public are entitled to ask, who actually benefited from the asset sales program, which brought in some $4.5 billion when the government was promising $6 to $7 billion? Clearly it is not electricity consumers or taxpayers. Pity the poor electricity consumers or taxpayers. They have been coshed by the asset sales program. They've been well and truly mugged. Kiwis will be paying the prices of national asset sales folly for generations. What a legacy of failure National will leave when they're given their marching orders in September. That when we look back on it and we say, who did sell off those assets that were built up by the generation? It was a small group of people, a small tight five of cabinet ministers who controlled everything in those days around the years 2008 to 2014. They controlled it and they sold off the silverware. They sold off the silverware and it was gone. New Zealand First is the only political party that has said unequivocally that if we are in a position of influence in the next government, we will buy back the shares of those power generating companies at a price no more than that initially paid for them. I'll repeat, under New Zealand First, we will buy back the shares at a price no more than that initially paid for them. We will then merge those state-owned power generating companies into one single energy entity. And that one single energy entity will then ensure there is security of supply, there is forward planning, and it is strategically developed so that all modes of power and gas generation are explored and all sustainable renewable energy sources are also explored across the length and breadth of this country, and that wholesale generating company will then supply to the retail market at consistent, reliable, affordable prices for the people of New Zealand. That's common sense, that's what New Zealanders expect, and that's what under New Zealand First we will provide. We will also, under New Zealand First, provide a power and gas discount during the winter months from May to September for those with a super gold card. It is very important that our seniors, our elderly, those who are requiring to ensure that they are comfortable in their homes over some of the bitter winters that we're experiencing, that they can afford to turn the heater on or turn the gas heater on. It's critical that people should not be suffering in their senior years because they cannot afford to stay warm. And New Zealand First will ensure that a discount is put in place from the state-owned enterprise that we will be forming to ensure that those people can again have dignity in their older age in their homes. Again, that's a policy that's common sense. It's common sense that we must explore in the future to ensure that the people of this country are taken care of. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, can I just say New Zealand First does not support this motion. This is again a transfer and it just endorses the whole situation that National is pushing time and time again. It is just backing up a situation where the wealthier in this country continue to get wealthier, and the regular everyday New Zealanders, the middle income New Zealanders, the low income New Zealanders, the hard working families in this country suffer, and we won't allow them to suffer. New Zealand First will ensure that we do something about it. It's common sense.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Speaker, I don't disagree.